My family didn't invite me to the reunion, so I showed up unannounced. Stand for myself. Of 3 siblings, and I am 28 years old. As a child. Always an obvious favorite. Large homes, ideal. Christmas card families. My brother, 35 meters. Boast about. My sister is a lawyer, of some sort, and my brother works in finance. Both of them reside in lovely suburban. Every family gathering is an opportunity for my parents to brag about their kids to friends. And then me, 2 years ago, I left my corporate position. Really proud. I'm content with my life and my 5-year boyfriend, and I share a rental. A lot of money. Stable. Frequently use, and I suppose. The subtle jabs about my hobby job, and remarks about how much better my life would be if I had 5 have become on the surface. But the tension has been for years. I didn't. Across my cousins. The platform. She appeared to be at a large family reunion, with all family gathered in one house. Type of gathering that my family often hosts a. There were my sister and brother, grinning with their partners, except for me, my aunt, uncle and cousins. Believe that I. Group conversation. Lost in all of my alerts. While my sister responds. Ignore me. Responds right away. Nothing happened for hours. I began to have the strange sensation when you know something is amiss but acknowledge it just yet. Following day, I asked her, doing an if there had been a get-together, using a conversational tone, for far too long. Silent, she said, "Oh, the reunion? I didn't think. You're always so busy with your everything." To answer, I questioned her about why she thought I wouldn't want to attend. After all, my family is my family, she seemed. The discussion aside as her voice became lighter. We just didn't want to bother you. You've missed a few. But primarily due to work, and not without informing them. It became increasingly evident that my absence was not an accident. They hadn't forgotten me. My invitation. I hung up and sat there. Exchange again. I had previously experienced exclusion. Center around my brothers. I used to convince. It wasn't deliberate. Didn't consider how. Because I didn't have children. I was unable to ignore it any longer, though, as I sat in my peaceful kitchen and the other room. My partner was incensed on. You need to go anyway. They don't get to decide you don't belong there, he replied. He was correct. Why should I allow them? I don't exist? I was tired of being treated like an afterthought by my family. I deserved to be a member of my shape at that point. I had been holding on to one card for weeks, and I hadn't played it yet. 2 weeks prior, my boyfriend and I wanted to do it, face to face with the people who should be. But we hadn't notified anyone. Now, though, I had my own motives. I would remind them of my presence if they were considering excluding me from my family. This time, they wouldn't ignore me. I declined my boyfriend's, bless him, invitation to accompany me. I had to take care of this on my own. We devised a contingency plan, and he agreed to drive up and grab me if things didn't work out. If they didn't want me there, I would arrive and then depart, but not before telling them what I had to say. Appear as though I had always meant to attend. I prepared a large quantity of snacks to bring with me in the days before. For me, this wasn't about proving myself, even if my partner insisted that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had to be there for myself. I had had enough of fading away because they didn't think I belonged. I promised myself that if I had to leave, I would go, smile, and share my news. Although I had no control on their feelings toward me, I did have influence over how I responded to it. I refused to let them treat me like an outsider for once. Additionally, closure if things didn't work out. First update, it took slightly over 3 hours to go to my folks' house. The majority of time was spent on how to appear unimpressed. To stop by since, well, I was aware of the family reunion. It seemed a bit ironic given why I was there, but the box of handmade cookies on the passenger seat smelled sweet and soothing. After checking the place twice, my partner assured me that he would be prepared to come get me if I needed a way out. I promised to keep him informed. The house was filled with automobiles parked on the lawn and along the driveway. When I eventually pulled there, I inhaled deeply. From within came the sounds of music and clinking dishes. I stepped through the slightly open door. The noise stopped as soon. I knew they had all seen me without having to glance up. I sensed dozens of eyes swinging toward me as conversations broke off in the middle of sentences. My mother recovered first. She hurried over, her voice too happy and high. "Oh, you succeeded? How unexpected." Moved away without giving me an embrace. Her eyes did. Warmth in her voice. There was an uneasy shuffle of movement in the room. People resumed their talks, but things had changed before my brother vanished. I saw him and my sister looking at each other across the room. Standing with her husband, my sister gave me a quick look before launching back into a boisterous discussion with other aunts. Across the room, I saw my cousin, the same person whose Instagram tale had given me the hint. Despite her apparent astonishment at seeing me, she nodded and smiled slightly. On the dining table, I set my package of goodies next to a spread of what appeared to be catered cuisine. Nobody even looked at my belongings. It hurt when I heard an aunt whispering to someone by the hallway. Did they not invite her on purpose? While I was moving, I slipped by them into the living room. After pausing to check my phone, my cousin drew me aside. A few minutes later, she lowered her voice and looked over her shoulder. "They didn't think you'd come. Your parents. Well, they didn't think you'd fit in here anymore." In spite of her apparent remorse, she said, "Fit in," as if I were a shattered puzzle piece in a family portrait. My dad was by the drink station when I left, but I can't recall what I muttered. I made the decision to give it a try. I questioned him why no one had told me about the reunion. As he filled the glass, he hardly raised his head to say, "We thought you'd be happier doing your own thing." The words hung thick in the air, yet it wasn't unkind. Since it was clear that I would not receive answers, I didn't press him any further. I didn't feel like making small chat with relatives who were acting as though they didn't see me and the box of cookies I had brought on the table. But it wasn't all bad. A few of my younger cousins approached to greet me. I felt a little better when they inquired about my company and mentioned that they had seen some of my work online. Someone cared about my life. At least, once more. There was a bustle of talk in the room, and I sat down close to the corner and browsed through my phone idly. I simply needed time to think on what to do next. I didn't want to cause a scene. My sister's voice broke through the commotion. At that point, her face was beaming with joy as she clapped her hands. The room fell silent as she said, "Everyone, I have some news to share." And everyone's eyes shifted to her as she revealed she was expecting her second child. Cheers broke out as everyone applauded. A few uncles made a joke about placing wagers on whether it would be a girl or a boy. My mother appeared as though she could burst with joy. Nobody gave me a sidelong glance. As I stood there, I heard the laughter and congrats. I seemed to have vanished once more. As usual, the same motif. The fact that I was present was irrelevant. The fact that I had arrived even though I hadn't been invited didn't matter. They would always treat me like an outsider and glorify my siblings. Something broke inside of me. I'm not sure if it was my dad's departure, the rumors I had heard, or the fact that my cookies were still unopened. Perhaps it was everything. I took a glass off the drink table and gave it a loud fork clink. Heads turned to face me as the room gradually became quiet once more. After enjoying the attention, my sister became irritated. I choose to disregard it. "Well," I continued steadily, "I have something to say too, since we're sharing big news." Second update. As soon as I walked in, the place was silent once more. All eyes were on me. All conversations halted, and forks froze in midair. But compared to when my sister revealed her pregnancy, the attention wasn't as enthusiastic or welcoming. I felt as though I had disturbed the sacred item. Despite my racing heart, I stood up and held my hand firm. "I just wanted to share some news of my own," I said. I raised my left hand to reveal the engagement ring, which sparkled in the light from the dining room. No one responded for a second when I said, "I got engaged 2 weeks ago." The silence was then broken by a few dispersed claps from the side of the room. My little cousins, God bless them, cheered me on. The rest of the room remained motionless, as though they were still processing it, but a courteous uncle gave a nod of assent before forcing a faint smile, the kind she typically saved for strangers. My mom's face fell. Why didn't you inform us earlier? Her voice sounded more like an accusation than one of enthusiasm or inquiry. Her gaze flicked to the ring and then returned to me. I didn't think twice. I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I wasn't sure you'd care. I wasn't invited here. After all, I assumed you no longer wanted me to be involved in matters. Discomfort spread throughout the room. Pretending to check their phones, people looked at each other or moved in their seats. After standing by the kitchen doorway, my brother moved forward and pushed off the frame. His voice was sharp, and his face was crimson. You are not the focus of this. You have to put yourself first at all times. There was a response to that. A few whispered to themselves, not now, yet I could sense that everyone was observing. My brother's crossed arms and intense gaze made it difficult for me to speak. So I did, really. I shot back, you all seem fine without me, but I don't remember getting an invitation to this little party. My engagement is as significant as the news of anybody else. The room became silent once more. At that point, my sister refused to look at me since she was still blushing from her own news. My mother's courteous facade was beginning to crumble, and her face changed to one that was more recognizable. Annoyance. I saw her take a breath, likely to speak, but before she could, a voice broke the silence. One of my relatives remarked, she has every reason to be angry. Her arms were folded as she sat close to the couch's edge. What did you expect if you didn't invite her? That she would simply remain silent indefinitely? Some people turned to look at my cousin. From the dining table came another voice. Yes, it's not as though she's incorrect. I sensed a change for a split second. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient. The fissures were visible. My mom shifted the topic, as she always does when she's cornered, likely understanding she was losing control of the situation. Well, let's not forget how exciting it is that your sister is having another baby, she remarked, bringing a smile back to her voice. The family is thrilled to hear that. There was a deflection, so clear, she was unable to give me this moment, not even for a brief moment. Immediately, the focus returned to my sister, who grinned broadly and thanked everyone once more for their congrats. My brother gave me a cocky grin like he was saying, see, I was done. I took my phone out of my pocket and texted my lover, come get me. Without uttering a word, I wasn't going to stay any longer than absolutely necessary. I picked up my handbag. The front entrance. Two of my younger relatives hurried after me, apologizing and inquiring as to where I was going. One of them hugged me and whispered, you don't deserve this. I returned the hug and assured her that I would be all right. It wasn't loud, but it was loud enough to hear my dad murmur, drama queen, from the side of the room as I was putting on my coat. I hesitated for a moment, but I didn't look back. Rather, I opened the door and went outdoors. The cool air cleared the heaviness in my chest and struck me like a jolt. One of my relatives came running out after me before I had gone halfway down the driveway. Her shoes crunched on the gravel as she jogged to catch up. Hold on, she yelled. I paused and looked at her. She appeared embarrassed, almost as if she was at a loss for words. I apologize, she blurted, for everything. It was courageous. In there you defended yourself. That was not how you should have been treated. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I managed to say, thanks. Perhaps someone from inside asked what I was doing when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She rushed back toward the house after giving me one final, pitying glance. After a few minutes, my boyfriend's vehicle arrived. I buckled my seatbelt, threw my purse on the seat and got in. I started crying as soon as I sensed the car moving. The tears flowed quickly and forcefully, like if I had been suppressing them for hours. My guy simply reached over and squeezed my hand without saying anything. As the trees beyond the window blurred by, I let it all out. The sobbing had subsided into soft sniffles by the time we drove onto the main road, although I still felt raw and there was also relief behind all of that. I hadn't just let it happen. For the first time, I had raised my voice, even if they didn't want to. I forced them to see me. At first, the only sound on the drive home was the hum of the road. As my fiancé drove, I gazed out the window, mentally reliving every moment of the recent reunion. I eventually opened up, discussing my brother's teasing, my dad's remark about my being a drama queen, my mother's disregard for me, and how my sister's pregnancy announcement had been the last straw. It all spilled out. with his palm resting on the gear shift. My fiancé listened and occasionally nodded. You did the right thing, he added, looking over when I was done. They have no right to declare you unimportant. We will proceed without requiring their consent. It was helpful to hear, yet I remained silent. My phone buzzed as we got close to home. I looked down. The cousin who had followed me out of the gathering had left me a message. You were correct. For a long time, your parents have been discussing you behind your back. I straightened my posture. There was more to the message. I apologize, but you must understand this. Your mother told everyone that your lack of a steady career makes you a disappointment. Additionally, she stated that your sister's announcement is far more significant than your engagement. It didn't seem fair to me. In an attempt to comprehend the words, I read them twice. I was still looking at the screen when I received a second message, this one containing screenshots. It came from a family catch-ups group chat, of which I had obviously been excluded. My mother's name was prominently displayed in one of the screenshots. I'm not sure why she would want to attend anyhow. She constantly makes things about herself and does her own thing. Giving up a real career to pretend to be a business owner? So self-centered, if nothing else. Sister is leading a life of which we may be proud. My chest constricted. The subsequent screen grab was even worse, since I didn't want her to show up and ruin the day with a dramatic story about her engagement. I honestly didn't notify her about the reunion. Who cares? She's not getting married first, after all. When the television came back to life, I sensed my fiancé looking at me. What is it? He inquired. Proof. I muttered. I was still gazing at the screenshots when we arrived home. I entered my family group chat, which I had been kicked out of years ago and was only periodically added back in for important updates, and added myself back in. I wasn't sure if this was because I was angry, wounded, or incredulous. I sent the screenshots as soon as I noticed my name appeared in the chat. Just those receipts for everyone to see, nothing else. I typed, "Is this how you truly feel about me?" a few seconds later. I suppose I ought to have remained forgotten at that time. Setting my phone aside, I waited. It was not long before the responses began to pour in. First to enter, my brother said, "This was private. You're blowing things out of proportion and being dramatic as usual." My sister then asked, "What did you anticipate would happen if you shared this?" "For no apparent reason. You're making things worse. Give it up." Their texts appeared like fast fire as I watched them type one after the other. Before my mother's name was ultimately displayed, I gave them a minute to vent. Compared to the others, her message was longer. Those remarks were misconstrued. "I don't like you creating all this needless drama, and you're reading too much into things. You've been overly sensitive all along." Taken out of context, I scribbled a response as I took up the phone once more. "I'm offended because this is not how any parent should discuss their child. This is your opinion of me. Even though I wasn't invited to my own family's reunion." My dad's name showed up in the chat for the first time, but he only typed a scene tag beneath my message instead of typing anything. I didn't stay to finish reading it. I threw my phone onto the couch and placed it on silent. Sitting beside me, my fiancé drew me in. However, my phone buzzed once again shortly after. One of my aunts sent me a private message saying I had no idea that any of this was going on. "I sincerely apologize for the treatment you received. You're worthy of better." Another reply arrived a few minutes later, saying, "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself. Nobody should be able to convince you otherwise." Although it wasn't much, it gave me hope that I wasn't going insane. I wondered for a long time if I was exaggerating. As my mother used to say, I might have been overly sensitive. However, I now had evidence, and a few supporters, at the very least. My phone rang just as I was beginning to believe that the worst was past. The name of my sister appeared on the screen. I nearly didn't respond, but I did. "She wasted no time at all," she remarked. "You're destroying the family dynamic. What prevented you from letting it go? Mom didn't want any conflict, therefore she didn't invite you. You have merely exacerbated the situation." I refrained from arguing. I didn't shout. "You don't let go of not being invited to your own family's reunion," I simply retorted. Then she hung up the phone. I decided I'd had enough that evening as I sat with my fiancé. I wasn't going to ask for their blessing all the time. A family who obviously didn't want me around was not someone I was going to pursue. I have to back down for my own mental health. The group chat was erased by me. My sister's number was blocked by me. And I allowed myself to give up for the first time in years. If love wasn't offered freely, I wouldn't beg for it. Update 4. My phone called out of the blue a week after the repercussions from the family group chat. I froze after taking a quick look at the screen. It was my father. For background, I didn't get many calls from my dad, never. I was astonished to see his name appear because he mainly left family affairs to my mom. I considered leaving it on voicemail, but my curiosity won out. I took it up. He initially only made the customary awkward, small talk. After a lengthy silence, he finally stated that he wanted to clarify the reunion. He spoke in a rigid, nearly practiced voice. He maintained it wasn't intended to harm me, and referred to it as a miscommunication. I hadn't heard anything like an apology from him in a long time. I didn't give him a pass. I inquired as to why I hadn't been invited earlier. After struggling to find the right words, he finally said it wasn't intentional. I told him that didn't make sense, since how can it be an accident to forget to invite your own child? I persisted, reminding him that my mother's own remarks in the group chat demonstrated differently, but he didn't respond. A second too long, the silence lingered, and then he broke. Quietly, he acknowledged she believed it would be better that way. Your mother did not wish for any conflict. That's when I heard it, my mother's voice, followed by a slight background rustle. She must have been using the speakerphone to listen in, because she abruptly interrupted the conversation. She answered abruptly, "I'm here too," as though I had called her somehow. The waterworks then began. She accused me of attacking her and making the family feel ashamed by publishing the screenshots, but her voice faltered. She claimed that I, not she, was the source of the issues. She claimed that I had made everything public, only to her embarrassment and trouble. I didn't shout or argue. I spoke steadily and assured her that I was only seeking the truth and wasn't making any personal attacks. After hearing what was going on, my fiancé, who had been sitting close by, approached. It was enough to ground me when he placed a hand on my shoulder and muttered, "Don't let them twist this." My mother's tone altered when she saw that I wasn't going to back down. After giving a loud sniff, she continued, "You only announced your engagement at the reunion to steal your sister's spotlight," which almost made me laugh aloud. I didn't think twice. Calmly, I informed her that, like my sister, I had every right to share good news about my life. No one was in competition with me. I informed her that none of this would have occurred if I had been invited in the first place. I could tell I had touched a nerve by the quiet that ensued. She chose to play the victim, which is her favorite approach, rather than admit anything. "It might be better if you don't attend family gatherings at all, if you can't forgive us and move on," she remarked forcefully. And there it was, the final command. I remained calm. I refrained from crying. I simply exhaled and answered, "If that's how you feel, then fine." Before hanging up, I sat there looking at the phone in my hand for a minute. My fiancé took a seat beside me and waited silently. I told him everything that had transpired, including my mom's accusation and ultimatum, as well as my dad's hesitant apology. "They're showing you exactly who they are," he continued, nodding. I lay in bed that night and gazed up at the ceiling. I kept replaying the phone call in my head. More than that, though, I began to reflect on all the events that had preceded this. I reflected on the holidays I had spent by myself, since my siblings' families came first. My parents' constant comparisons of my unstable career to my brother's corner office and sister's work at the law company. The understated appearance, the contemptuous remarks. This was where it had all been leading. As I laid there, I came to the realization that I didn't deserve this. I wasn't worthy of fighting for meager affection or acting as though nothing was wrong. My siblings would always come first, as my family had often demonstrated to me. For the first time, I made the decision to stop pursuing those who made me feel inadequate. My fiancé sat down across from me and handed me a cup of coffee. The following morning, he had a solemn expression. He remarked, "I've been thinking, how about hosting our engagement celebration? Something modest, just those who genuinely stand by us." The concept sounded odd at first. I hadn't even considered celebrating without my family, because they had been my default for so long. However, it made more sense the more I about it. Why should I continue to expend my energy on indifferent people? People that loved us for who we were, not who they wanted us to be, were the ones I wanted to celebrate this milestone with. After the reunion, we had a list of friends, my fiancé's family, and a couple of cousins, who had gotten in touch with me privately. They all agreed that I was deserving of better treatment. I made the decision to focus on the folks who came to me unconditionally and let go of the things I couldn't control. I kept the celebration a secret from my parents and siblings. I was tired of trying to mend something that had been damaged for years, and realized that it would only lead to more turmoil. At this point, I was not going to give up trying to find a family that didn't recognize me. At last, I was making my own decision. Fifth update. Everything I didn't know I needed was provided at the engagement party. just my fiancé's family, a few of my relatives, who had been there for me through all the turmoil, and close friends made it modest and private. We arranged our backyard with string lights, served a variety of takeout and homemade cuisine, and adorned the tables with flowers that my fiancé had purchased from a nearby market. EasyJet ideal. Early in the evening, people began to arrive. I hadn't experienced such genuine enthusiasm at a family gathering in years, but the atmosphere was lighthearted and full of laughs. As soon as she got there, the cousin who had sent me the screenshots gave me a hug. "You're worthy of better," she said. She didn't mention the reunion, which I appreciated. "We're proud of you." An hour later, the biggest surprise arrived. Another car drew up to the curb, and my fiancé gave me a little shove. One of my aunts was leaving when I turned around. This aunt wasn't just any aunt though. She was the only one to privately text me to apologize and say she didn't know what had been going on following the group chat controversy. She was unexpected, but there she was, smiling warmly and holding a modest wrapped gift. As she entered the yard, she added, "I hope it's okay that I came." She gave me a hug, and for a second, I was speechless. "I wanted to see you. Congratulations in person." I simply nodded and opened the door for her. It meant more to me than words could express. To have her there, the folks who came through for me without reservation were more important than the evening. My fiancé became silent as he remarked with a smile, "I've seen her overcome so many obstacles and still come out stronger. Our creating together make me really proud." As the audience applauded, someone exclaimed, "People who truly wanted celebrating were all around me." As I stood there with my glass, I felt like I was first time. There was only love. No comparisons, and no compulsion to prove anything. And ended up wrapping things late. Laughing, I haven't seen in years. After 2 weeks, I received an unexpected. Before I opened my email, I sat there looking. He apologized first. It felt different. He acknowledged that other instances he had not defended me. He expressed guilt for not doing more to help me. He had no idea how harmed over the years. "I know I haven't needed me to," he wrote, "even though it might take some time. I hope we can begin repairing our friendship." I scrolled down after reading it twice. "Your mom still doesn't see." Caused me to pause. I'm not sure whether she will ever own up to her faults because she feels all of this. I also apologize for that. Although it hurt, it wasn't shocking. My mother had never taken. I took some. And then I typed up a brief one. I praised my dad for getting in touch and let him know that while I sides if he really wanted. I honestly didn't require a response, so I didn't anticipate. I wasn't waiting for him to suddenly turn into the ideal father. His little step was plenty. Compromises. I refused to put myself appreciated naturally. Stir things up. A few days later. Passive-aggressive Facebook. It was ambiguous but clear enough. It's funny how some people enjoy revealing personal details to get attention, good or bad. I didn't answer. I didn't even give myself enough time to become it. After blocking her, I simply went on. Her opinions, her sarcasm, and her judgment no longer had any. Life was fuller, but in the weeks that followed, I concentrated on running my company, organizing our wedding, and hanging out with the individuals who genuinely cared about me. I at last discovered serenity when I let go of the need to win my family's approval. In retrospect, I saw how much of my life had been wasted attempting to conform. That I was never meant to fit, because I was different. My family had always made me feel inferior. However, that didn't prove me incorrect. Recognize my of them, not of me. Family is everything, as some people may say, and perhaps it is true for them. However, rather than condemnation and exclusion, family should be about love, respect. Happier as I'm finally creating a life with individuals that support. I am going forth guilt-free and regret-free. I have no idea what the future holds for my parents or siblings, but I do know that I will anything less than what I am worthy of. And to be honest, it feels really nice